Okay, we are jumping right into Parashat Korach. Let's go. Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kahat ben Levi. So we jump in. We're encountering the section of Parashat Bamidbar, the second half, or of Sefer Bamidbar, the second half of the book of Numbers. It's the book of rebellion. It's the book of challenges. It's the book of Moshe's leadership being challenged, of people kvetching, of people complaining. The demarcation point was in Parshat Bahalotcha, was back when we saw those words, Vayihi bin Soa Haaron Vayomer Moshe, and it happened when the ark would travel, Moses would say, Kumasha, and so on. And after that moment, we see a lot of negativity enter into the book of Numbers, and Korach is certainly no exception. So the introductory verse, very simply, Korach, Ben Yitzhar, the son of Yitzhar, the son of Kahat, the son of Levi. So we're going back. We have four generations. Korach, his father, his grandfather, and his great-grandfather. And then the Hebrew, again, I believe we looked at this even last year. We often look at this, Vayikach. So this is what's known as, for the grammar nuts out there, such as myself, I consider myself one as well, that this is a transitive verb. Vayikach. What that means is that it needs an object. You can't just, an intransitive verb is a verb that does not require an object. So for example, to run is an intransitive. I don't need to tell you, well, it could be both. You could run the restaurant. That would be a transitive form of the verb, or you could just run, and that would be an intransitive verb. Vayikach here is, there's no object. Korach took. Yes. What did he take? What did Korach take? And we don't have a very clear answer. But and Datan and Aviram, Bnei Eliav, the sons of Eliav, and On ben Pelet. So you have a whole posse, a whole group here of four people: Korach, Datan, Aviram, and On. Those four people are running the rebellion against Moses. Okay, so we have a few questions here. One has to do with the people. Who are these people? And we're going to look today at Korach. We have this verb, and he took, and we're going to discuss what exactly that means, that he took, and then we're going to look a little bit at Moshe's response to them to understand exactly what their challenge is. So let's jump right into Rashi. Rashi says, what did Korach take? Lakach et atzmo. He took himself. He moved himself to one side, liot nechalak mitoch ha'ida, to separate himself from out of the community in order la'orer al ha'kehuna. Korach had an issue. Korach wanted to challenge the priesthood which had been given to Aharon. Right? Keep in mind, Korach and Moshe share a great-grandfather. I don't know family trees well enough to tell you what cousin and how many times removed that might be, but Korach and Moshe and Aharon and Miriam, right, they're all in the same family, they're all in the same tribes, and we're not that far removed from Levi, going back from there's another, I don't know if it's here, but there's another midrash which Rashi quotes it actually, that says that we don't go back, you could go back another generation, and what would that be? Ben Levi, Ben Yaakov. You could go all the way back to Jacob if you wanted to, but because Jacob was this very unique tzaddik, we don't want to connect him to Korach, to the evil components of Korach. So Rashi says simply that this verb vayikach and Korach took, it's, by the way, so here's where translations become commentaries, right? It says he betook himself. That phrase himself, you know how to say himself in Hebrew?
Atzmo.
Atzmo. Where is Atzmo in the verse? It's nowhere. It's in Rashi. So that's how the translation says, I can't translate it, and Korach took.
You're right on.
I have to steal it from Rashi and from Tamara. I have to borrow that word. So that's how the translation here
I guess he sees you.
becomes a commentary. So now Vaikach Korach, Rashi says he took himself. Rashi has another comment, gives a few examples. Rashi says, what else could it be? Mashach Rashi Sanhedraot Shebahem Dvarim. He took people with words. He, hold on, the translation here. He won over the chiefs of the Sanhedrin by fine words. Okay, and there are some other examples about how people Kachui Machem Dvarim, take words with you. Kach et Aharon. When God says to Moshe, it should really be speak to Aaron, but it's take Aaron, take him with you, right? Lead him with your words. So it could be. So Rashi offers two explanations. Rashi says Vaikach could be he took himself to one side, he established his own opposition, or his own seat of opposition. The other is that he took people with him, he convinced people. All of this just struggling to explain what Vaikach is. There is a very famous midrash, and I'm very wary to use the word famous. A lot of rabbis do that. I probably do it sometimes also. We talk about there's a famous Gemara, there's a famous Talmud, and nothing is achieved by calling something famous except for making people feel bad who have never heard about it before. So I retract my phrase famous, and I'll say there's a midrash, which is well known to lots of people. And the midrash says, may or may not be you, may or may not, with all due respect. So this midrash says, what was Korach's argument, right? You're familiar with this midrash about the tchelet, where Rashi, or where the mitzvah has just been given that you have to have tchelet, you have to have a blue string on the corner of the garment. And Korach says, what about a garment, shekulo tchelet, that's entirely blue? Does it still require the blue string? And you just told me that you have to have a mezuzah on the house. And Korach says, why do you have to have a mezuzah? Because a mezuzah has the name of God, has the Torah written inside it. How about a bayit malei sfarim, a house that's filled with books? Does it still require your nominal, your little mezuzah on the front if the house is filled with books? These are the kind of challenges that Korach is offering. And the Targum, Yonatan, we looked at this, I believe, last week. We looked at the concept of Targum, of these traditional Aramaic translations, which were commentaries as well. And I thought this was a little bit fun for one word, because it says, here's the translation of the Targum. Korach bar Titzar, I don't know why it says Yitzar, should be, bar Kahat, because it says in Hebrew, Yitzar. Maybe there's maybe there's an English translation of Yitzhar, that's Titzar, I don't know. The son of Kahat, the son of Levi, with Datan and Aviram, right? And On ben Pelet of the Bnei Ruvain. This is all literal. This is all very literal now. And then it says, what did he take? His robe, which was all of hyacinth, which is, the Aramaic is tichla, from the Hebrew word techelet, which would be that blue. That's what Korach took. He took the garment. And he rose up boldly in the face of Moshe, appointed a different observance in the matter of the hyacinth, okay? And Moses responded, and that's basically it. So the Targum Yonatan offers a third option, that what did he take? He actually took that garment, and he showed it to Moshe and said, Moshe, this blue garment, you're telling me it needs blue fringes on the ends? The reason I wanted to show you this is because this is a rare appearance of a very unique Aramaic word, that Korach rose up boldly. This word boldly in Aramaic, Bechutzpah.
Very funny.
This is one of the sources of the Hebrew word, what we used to call chutzpah,
Yeah.
from the Targum, that Korach rose up boldly.
Chutzpah.
Chutzpah. That was Korach, filled with chutzpah. Rav Kook writes about higher level chutzpah, that there's lower chutzpah and there's higher chutzpah. We should all be blessed to have that higher level of chutzpah. That's what a Jew needs to make this world a better place. We don't try to do, we celebrate chutzpah on a certain level, but not this time. Not this
Rabbi,
time.
here is meant in a good way or in a bad way?
Here it's a bad way.
Oh, okay. When is chutzpah? All right.
And it
Okay,
says,
sorry.
so v'kamu b'chutzpah, they got up, they're just the literal translation, they got up boldly. V'oru, they taught hilchata, Jewish law, ba'anpoi de Moshe, in Moshe's face. Mean the teacher, the Rebbe, is standing right there. And what's part of their sin is that they're getting out there and they're saying, oh, you know how Moshe said that you need to have blue strings? Look at this garment. No, you don't need blue strings. Okay, so that's the Targum. Okay, so we've seen three explanations of that phrase vayikach, and now let's look at who Korach is, because I think most believe that this is our introduction to Korach. We've never seen him before. But we have seen Korach before. Very little known, unless you're paying very close attention, and way back in Parshat Vayishlach, way back in the book of Bereshit, Korach, there was a name drop. Korach was mentioned in two different verses, part of the descendants of Esav. Look at this. Ve'ele toldot. These are the generations of Esav, that is Edom. Esav had a few wives. He took his wives from among the Canaanite women, right, which was very distressing to his father, right, who did not want this. Ada was one of the wives, daughter of Elon the Hittite, and Oholivama, the daughter of Anna, the daughter of Tzivon the Chivite. These were his daughters, or his wives, and also Bosmat, the daughter of Yishmael and the sister of Nevayot, right? So there are three daughters. So let's see who the children are. So Ada, wife number one, bears Eliphaz. Okay, Bosmat gives birth, wife number three, gives birth to Reuel. Oholivama, wife number two, gives birth to Yeush, to Ya'alam, and Korach. So wait, there's a Korach who is a son of Esav. So we've seen this name before. Are we seeing the same person? I'm not sure. But we've seen this name before, in that Korach was a son of Esav. Right? And this is not a, if you ever go on Jewish Jeopardy, and this is good Jewish trivia. Who was Korach? And the answer, Esav's son, is not incorrect, because he's there. And then we see, this is chapter 36, verse 5. And then 10 verses later, chapter 36, verse 15, we're still in the leadership of Esav. Ela alufei b'nei Esav, b'nei Eliphaz. So these are the clans of the children of Esav. So remember, we saw Eliphaz, right? So now we're looking at Esav's grandchildren. Aluf Teman, so one is Teman, the clan of Teman, one is Omar, one is Tzfo, one is Knaz. So we're getting down to, these are Esav's grandchildren. One is Korach, one is Gatam, one is Amalek, right? Did you know Amalek, right? Where we wipe out the name of Amalek, and that's going to be later on the children of Israel, the already nation. Now we're back in the book of Genesis. Amalek they're named after one of Esav's grandsons. And there are all these traditions about him being sent to kill Yaakov. You familiar that Esav wanted to kill Yaakov, so he sent his grandson to do the deed, because that's what grandchildren are for, I guess. And he sent his grandson, and there's one tradition that instead of killing Yaakov, he took his money, because poverty is akin to a loss of life. When one loses all their possessions, they've lost an element of life. So anyway, Ela Alufe Eliphaz, these are the clans of Eliphaz. Remember, Eliphaz was the son of Ada. So if we're paying attention, because it's hard to really focus on these genealogies, we've seen something very unusual. Who is Korach? Because in verse 5, Korach is the son of Ahalivama, who was the wife of Esav. In verse 16, so 11 verses later, Korach is a descendant of Eliphaz, who is a son of Esav. Where did Korach come from? Did he come from Esav's son or Esav's wife? According to verse 5, Esav's wife. According to verse 16, Esav's son, Eliphaz, was the father. So which is it? And the answer is both. Rashi, Korach was an illegitimate child. He was the son of Eliphaz, Esav's son, and he was who had taken his father's wife, for he is enumerated. So Rashi notes this and said that there was I suppose, a semi-incestuous relationship between Esav's son and Esav's wife, which produced this child, Korach. And, you could do the math. The ages could work out. We don't know about what was happening in the ancient world it could have been that, Eliphaz, it would be a very normal circumstance in which a person's son and a person's third wife would be of similar ages. That would not be an unusual scenario. We're not, discussing that aspect, but simply that Korach to Esav was both Esav's stepson and grandson at the same time. So Korach was the original Korach, going back a few generations. Now we know this Korach is not that Korach. We know this Korach, it tells us. Korach is the son of Yitzhar, is the son of Kahat, is the son of Levi. And then there is another Korach, who is this, in Hebrew, Mamzer. He's illegitimate. And one assumes in the Torah world that with this illegitimate nature comes characteristics. And he wasn't given the upbringing that could make him righteous. And Korach was not such a good guy. But look at what there's a fascinating verse, which will be very familiar to you, at least the first half. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 7. Zecher Tzadik Livracha. You've heard that phrase? Zecher Tzadik Livracha. That's the first letters, Zatzal, or Zal is the first and the third letter, Zecher Livracha. So we put after people's names after they passed on. Zecher Livracha, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. So that's a verse in Mishlei and Proverbs. The name of the righteous is invoked in blessing. V'shem Risha'im Yirkav. But the fame of the wicked rots. The righteous is invoked in blessing. The fame of the wicked rots. That's the verse in Proverbs. What does it mean, the fame of the wicked rots? So look at what the Talmud says in Tractate Yoma, which is where the Daf Yomi is studying now. What does it mean, the name of the wicked shall rot? How does a name rot? Rabbi Eliezer says it means decay will spread on their names, meaning that we do not call others by their names, and the name will sink into oblivion. Evil person doesn't get people named after them. And then there's an example given by Doeg, that there was a Doeg, a bad Doeg, and then somebody who was punished, who lived many generations later, who died an unfortunate death. But we'll leave that. It's just a proof story to the fact that one shouldn't name after the wicked. I was not recently, I guess everything seems pre-pandemic, went to on a trip to Germany, on a solidarity trip to Germany to visit the community of Halle. And right after that attack at Yom Kippur time. And in the old Halle synagogue, again, not the old synagogue had been destroyed in Kristallnacht, but it was the old cemetery building that had been transformed into a synagogue. They had moved some of the artifacts of the synagogue to the cemetery building when the synagogue had been burned. But included in that was a board of plaques commemorating the Jewish soldiers who had, I believed, had perished, either served or perished in World War I, fighting for Germany. There's a list of names of in World War I fighting for Germany. What are the names? Adolf Goldstein, Rudolf, this and that, Gerhard, all these names that, and there was a whole generation of Adolfs who changed their name. Many did, many didn't, and we've known lots of Jewish people whose names were Adolf, and that was the reality. But the minute that name is associated with evil, the name disappears from our people. Right? And that's what the Gemara, that's what the Talmud says, that this is based on the verse in Mishlei, in Proverbs, the fame of the wicked rots. It means decay will spread on their names. We don't keep those names alive of wicked people. And so the question will come back. We're talking about Korach. We're talking about somebody who was in the descendants of both Yishmael and Esav, who was a mamzer. Why is that person now, a few generations later, 3 generations later, why does he have an anakel? Why does he have somebody who is carrying his name? Why does Korach have that person's name? Right? And this is where we come to the Chasam Sofer. I hope you're wondering when we were going to get to the Chatam Sofer. We've arrived at the Chatam Sofer. He says, Ani Tama, I am bewildered. I wonder. Al Tzadikim B'nai Levi, on these righteous people, the descendants of Levi, Shekaru Shem Benam Korach, who called their son Korach, Shehu Shem Me'alufe Esav, which was the name of one of the clans of Esav. How do you use that? How do you use that name? Right? How many times does the Mohel, when they say, what's the child's name? And the Mohel hears this newfangled 21st century modern name that's never before been seen in Jewish history, and the Mohel raises an eyebrow and says, okay, we'll give it that name. But what does the Mohel say when the name is Korach? What would you do? I don't know. If a child in Shar Shamayim in 2021, if the parents want to name the child Korach or Esav, or what do you do? And the Chasam Sofer is saying these holy people, B'nai Levi, the grandchildren of Levi, how do they name their child Korach? V'kai malan, and don't we have, we've established Rishaim lo maskinam b'shmayu, that just as we saw in the Talmud, that we just quoted in the Talmud, that we don't use the name of the wicked. Ulai hainu de kamash malan, maybe this is what it's teaching us. Kra de miachso ad Levi, the verse which connects Korach all the way back to Levi, to his great-grandfather. Lomar, Afal pi shahaya chut hamishulash, even though he had 3 generations connecting him to Levi, which is chut hamishulash, is the 3-folded cord, which is the strong. That's when you get to the strength of the rope, is that 3-folded cord. That's a verse. Chut hamishulash lo bimheira yinatek, that the 3 stranded cord does not tear easily. Mikol makom nitak mehera. In any event, even though there was strong lineage, it was quickly disrupted. It was quickly broken. Al da aske bishmei de rasha, because they used the name of the wicked person. V'zehu vayikach Korach. That's what it means. And Korach took. Zeh Hashem Korach. That the name Korach, not the person, the name Korach, lakach et kol ma shehaya lo lihitkadesh, took away everything that this person would have had to sanctify otherwise. This person born to holy people. This person, a great-grandson of Levi, of the tribe of Levi. This person born into holiness. That name, giving him the wicked name, the Chasam Sofer says, took away the merits of the lineage. Al Yedei Shahaya Ben Yitzhar V'Kahat V'Levi Avotav, by virtue of the fact that, the merits that he had, that he was the son of Yitzhar and Kahat and Levi, all these holy people. V'Zehu Hashem Korach Lakach et Hakol. The name Korach took it all away.
That goes right to the beginning by Yikat Korach.
That's the Chasam Sofer's explanation, to read it back into the verse. Right. Vayikach Korach. Korach took, the Chasam Sofer says, the name Korach took away the following: the fact that he was Ben Yitzhar, Ben Kahat, Ben Levi. It's a very creative reading. The name Korach, not Korach himself, and not Korach, the son of Yitzhar, the guy who took. It's that the name Korach took away the merits that were his for the taking. When a person is born into a holy family, they have those merits. The fact that his parents decided to give him the legacy of wickedness took away the merits. That's what the Chasam Sofer says. This is the responsibility that parents have when giving a name to a child, because that name gives the child their direction in life, gives the child the merits of the one who, or the idea that they're named after. So that's a very interesting, I think, a very, very unique approach of the Chasam Sofer. So we saw basically 4 different approaches to this idea that Korach took. Any questions before we move on very briefly to Rav Hirsch?
I think, Rabbi, that it's a wonderful explanation, and it simplifies or gives meaning to something that I found. I tried reading the Parasha beforehand, shot, and frankly incomprehensible, and really couldn't make anything of it. And this gives a form and some direction. So thank you very, very much.
Wonderful. I appreciate that. Let's move forward to Moshe's response. And there's really one small thing that I want to point out. Small. It's a big idea, but a small detail that I want to point out. Moshe responds to Korach and to his people. And keep in mind that there was Korach, there was Datan and Aviram who operate together, and then there was this guy On ben Pelet who disappears from the story. And there's a whole midrash about how his wife talked him out of it and how his wisdom was listening to his wife. So we're left with Korach and Datan and Aviram. Okay, so Vayedaber el Korach. So Moshe has this whole conversation with Korach and his company. And he says, Korach, we're going to have this incense challenge, right? It's a little bit reminiscent of Eliyahu on Har Carmel with the prophets of Baal and so on. So You have this little way. We're going to establish who God wants to be the prophet, right? And who the ground is going to open up for and cause you to disappear, and who God actually wants to be the prophet. So that's what Moshe says to Korach and all his company. And he challenges them based on the service. It's about the incense. The service is what we're talking about here. It's about what the Levites can do, right? Because Korach was a Levite. And so Korach's challenge to Moshe is, I'm a Levite, you're a Levite, your brother is a Levite. Why is he the one who's doing all the great service and not me? That's Korach. The others don't have that same claim, right? Datan and Aviram are not Levites. They're from the tribe of Reuven, who is the oldest sibling. So what might their challenge be? Any guesses what Datan and Aviram's challenge might be?
Why they can't participate in getting some of the tithes.
So it could be they want to be with Levi. They want to be part of the tribe of Levi. That could be. What else might they be challenging? Keep in mind who their ancestor was. Their ancestor was Reuven. Reuven is the firstborn. Moshe, you're from the tribe of Levi. And yet, what was Levi? It was Reuven, and then who came? Shimon, and then Levi, the third. Moshe, why are you the leader? We should be the leader. We are the descendants of the firstborn. So again, this is what Rav Hirsch is going to point out. Korach challenged based on the service. Datan and Aviram, because he was an inheritor of Levi. Datan and Aviram challenged based on leadership. Because look at what, and then separately, Moshe, then Vayishlach Moshe, Likro LeDatan v'Aviram. He addresses them differently. He talks to Korach. You know, they're kind of presented together as a package in the first verse. Korach and Datan and Aviram and On Ben Pela, they're all coming to challenge Moshe. Moshe addresses Korach on the one hand and Datan and Aviram on the other hand. And what does he say to them? He called for them. They said, Lo na'aleh, we won't come. Lo na'aleh is very reminiscent of what the spies say. Lo nuchal la'alot, we can't come up, right? Lo na'aleh, we're not coming up. We're not coming to you, Moshe. Is it not enough that you brought us from a land flowing with milk and honey to have us die in the wilderness, that you will also lord it over us? And this is a jarring statement. Have you brought us from where? From Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash. Right? You've heard that phrase before, but you've never heard it like this. Describing Egypt. They talk about the land. You took us from the land of milk and honey. Don't you remember how great Egypt was? Right? This is the craziness of nostalgia, that it creates lies in one's head, that a slave people suddenly remember this great and flowing and wonderful land. And by the way, who cares if it was wonderful? Who cares if it was flowing with milk and honey? You were slaves. Better to be a free person in the wilderness than a slave in the most beautiful, lush meadow. Who cares where you're standing? But this is what nostalgia does to them. They're saying, Moshe, ki tistarer alenu, gam histarer. This word, tistarer, it's connected to the modern Hebrew word, what we use in modern Hebrew, of a sar. You know what a sar is?
An officer.
An officer, or
Guard.
literally, what's that?
A guard?
A guard also, and literally in government context, a sar is a minister. In Israel, for example, the sar hachutz is the foreign minister.
Right.
The sar habriut is the health minister. The sar tachbura is the transportation minister. This word sar comes from the Hebrew lissorer or tistarer. Moshe, are you going to lord it over us? So again, Korach, his challenge was in this word, la'avod. His challenge was about avodah. Datan and Aviram's challenge was about lihistorer, about what's known, he was srara, we would call it, srara, which would be that kind of leadership. Let's read Rav Hirsch, and this will be
Rabbi, I want to just say something when, is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. It's just interesting when they say no na'aleh, because you would say no nelech or maybe something like that. But na'aleh is like for an aliyah, so they're almost realizing that they're not going to be going up. An aliyah is when you go up to the making aliyah to Israel.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very interesting that they do use. It's a very unique phrase. It's translated right. We will not come, but that's not the right translation. Lo na'aleh. We will not ascend. We will not go up. Right. It's a very, very unique phrasing, which is reminiscent of lots of other concepts in the Torah, including going to the land of Israel, Cheryl, as you pointed out beautifully. So here's what Rav Hirsch says. Since Moshe approached Korach, Datan, Aviram separately, it appears the rebellion formed two groups with two different aims. Although they were united in rebelling, Korach's aim differed from that in Datan and Aviram. Korach stood up for the rights of his tribe, Levi. They were violated, as it were, by the preference given to Aaron. Korach, and this, I can't read this without translating it into contemporary concepts, but I'll leave that for you to do on your own. He is the pretended champion of equal rights for all. He pretends, he says, everyone should be a leader, right? Why, Aaron, are you in a position of power and authority and privilege? Aaron, why is that you and not me? Had he been consistent, he would have waived them, but he was not content with these privileges of being a Levite, and under the guise of equal rights for all, he also sought the honor of priesthood. He didn't want equal rights. He wanted to be privileged as well. He wanted the priesthood for himself, right? So he came in and said, why is one person made to be higher than another? We should all be the same. What he's really saying is, I want to be up there also. I want to be a leader also. By contrast, Datan and Aviram had no special importance to the office of the priesthood and its honor. What they resented was Moshe's political position. And they joined Korach under the assumption that once people's trust in the divine origin of Moshe's mission had been undermined, his position in the nation would be destroyed also. They joined Korach because they said, Korach, if you succeed in knocking Moshe down and Aaron down from being the chosen one in terms of the service, then we can also knock him down from his position of influence and power. And I just wanted to bring this for this paragraph because I think it's a very powerful paragraph that Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch offers us. He says, in Jewish thought, public office dignifies the server. This is what they didn't understand. This is what the challengers did not get, is that the public office dignifies the server because it entails service of the community. The bearer of the office, a person who is in public office or is in a position of Jewish authority, does not control others, he serves them. Person does not assume srara, that's what Datan Aviram says, he assumes avdut. Right? A person does not assume srara, that's lordship, authority, they assume avdut. They assume a type of servitude. In Judaism, authority is servitude. Being in a position of power is when one is able to serve the people. The dignity of public service, the honor, the dignity, the kavod, lies in the fact that the individual is imbued with the idea of the community and its purposes, which he promotes in the spirit of the community and from its standpoint. That's it. What they didn't understand, they challenged Moshe. And they said, Moshe, how come you, by being the leader, are up here, are up there, and we are down here? Moshe, how come you're elevated and we are not? And what Rav Hirsch says is that they misunderstood the idea of Jewish leadership, because to be a leader is not to be elevated. It's, yes, to embody the ideals of the community, and therefore there's the idea of honor and dignity associated with it. But the position itself is a position of serving the people, not a position of lording over the people. And every leader should internalize this, that the great zechut, the great merit of being a leader is of embodying the values of the community and not controlling the community with one's own whims and one's own desires. That's Jewish leadership, says Rav Hirsch. And that's what Datan and Aviram and Korach completely misunderstood about what they were going for. They were trying to knock Moshe down. Whereas Moshe, ideally a good leader, doesn't see themselves as being better or higher, but rather simply being an expression of the will of the community and of the values of the community.
But maybe they also wanted to serve, but they just wanted to be on top and still do good.
Yes, maybe they wanted to serve. It's implicit in Datan Aviram's words. Part of what he's getting is, did you take us out just to rule over us? That word, ki tistarer aleinu, right? That you would also lord it over us. So they're seeing him as posturing in a certain way that probably is not accurate for Moshe. I think that's what he's pointing out. But it could be, there is a temptation to try to ascribe positive motivation to them. It's difficult in this situation with Korach, and it's difficult because of the way that God deals with them also, that they're swallowed up by the ground. They're completely done away with, this whole generation. So by virtue of the results, we're kind of tempted to read negative concepts into it. Esther.
Sometimes leaders go in, become leaders because they are that type of personality. But once they get to be the top leader, they forget why they went in there in the first place, and the power of the job takes over and changes their where they're going.
Correct. Yeah. Power corrupts.
It's really too bad. They need to come to this class.
Power corrupts, absolutely. And if you know of any leaders who are looking for a good Parsha class on Thursday afternoons, or anyone, just spread the word.
Right.
You're right. Power does corrupt. It does have the tendency to corrupt, for people to lose focus of that. So today we covered a good deal, I think. Firstly, Korach, what did he take? So Rashi says he took himself to one side, everyone else to another side, number one. Number two, he took people in with his words. The Targum said he took the garment, the blue garment, to show to people and to teach people, to undermine Moshe's teaching. The Chasam Sofer says the name Korach took away the merits that Korach would have had otherwise of being a descendant of holy people. The name of the wicked that he was given, the wicked name that he was given, undermined all of that. And then we looked at Rav Hirsch on the difference between Korach's intent, which was to put himself in the position of ritual prominence by being a priest as well, just like Aharon, because he's a descendant of Levi, versus Datan and Aviram, who were challenging Moshe's position of leadership, not priesthood, but leadership, and Moshe's response to each of them separately. So that's our peek into Parshat Korach. Tamara?
Yeah. One last problem, like Va'achla otam karega, God's reaction, the severity of his reaction is for another time very troubling.
Yes, it is. The severity of the reaction, which is that the earth opens up and swallows them immediately. There was a big deal was made. This happens, more often, I think, than we like. That when the Parsha comes to life, because if you follow the news, thank God nobody was hurt, but there was a parking lot outside Shaare Zedek Hospital in Jerusalem. A sinkhole opened up this week, and so how many people looked at that and said, "Really, on the week of Parshat Korach, a hole opens up in the earth right outside and swallows up all these cars?" thank God no one was hurt. Thank God, the miracle of miracles, and it should have. But but yes, the punishment and why that is the punishment and how it fits the crime is certainly worthy of next year's Korach class,
Okay.
for sure.
All right, we should check who owned those cars that went down into the pit. I have a quick comment that I wonder if Korach had a choice. To what extent do we feel, because Jews typically do avoid using names of people who've come to a bad end or who live badly. But given the name, did he have a choice? Could he have transcended that the influence of a bad name?
It's a great question. The Chasam Sofer seems to imply that at the very least it took away his merits. Not that it made him evil, but it didn't give him the advance in life that he would have had otherwise. It's a fascinating topic because there are examples of people who have, not just names of wicked, but names. There's a tradition of not naming directly after people who had. Well, let me give an example. I have a friend whose first name is Avi, not Avraham, but Avi. Why? What does Avi mean? It means my father, because his grandfather had passed away at a very young age. And there was a tradition in that community of not naming directly. And so this man named his son after his father, but named him Avi Gershon, my father Gershon, as opposed to just Gershon, which was the father's name. So as not to make a direct idea. There's also, a separate note. That's not a concept of good and evil. That's just the concept of the idea of gezerah, of decrees and of avoiding decrees in the spiritual world. But in the Talmud, there's a sage whose name is Rabbi Yishmael. Very prominent. Rabbi Yishmael is a prominent sage. How did he get the name Yishmael? Yishmael is a holy name, by the way. The word I couldn't imagine a holier name. Yishma is to hear. El, God hears. God hears my prayers. Yishmael. That's what Hagar, Yishmael's mother, right? She prays. Yishmael. There's a tradition that Yishmael actually did tshuva. He repented at the end of his life because Yishmael and Yitzchak are together at Avraham's burial. So there's something to that, but it certainly is. I'm sure that there's a great article that's been written on this somewhere to be found in some periodical on naming after the wicked. Just one further point is that for many years there were also traditions of not naming after people who were too good, meaning, who am I to be named Moshe? Right? In the Talmud, you don't have Rebbe Moshe. The idea of being named Moshe is a bit audacious if you think about it. If Moshe Rabbeinu, if there was one Moshe, as it said, there's an inscription written on Maimonides' tombstone, Mi Moshe ad Moshe, from Moses to Moses, there was none like him in Israel. Well, because there weren't that many Moseses in between Moses and Moses, because for a millennium, there was, for 1,000 years, nobody was named Moshe. In Talmudic times, it just wasn't a name. I'm trying to think of Rebbe Aharon. You don't have a Rebbe Aharon in the Talmud. So there was an idea also to avoid naming after people who were too sacred. There are some names which are left biblical, at least for a certain period of history. Okay, anyway, we'll close with that. Thank you all for joining. Wonderful to see you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.